And good morning. How's everybody doing? Dr. Roddenberry coming to you live from Willow Springs, North Carolina. Good morning, Shame. Thanks for coming today. It is good to see you in class today. Hope you're doing well. Fantastic. All right. So let me see. Let me adjust my camera, get myself here. I got my Wake Tech t-shirt. You can hardly see it. That's fine. All right. So any questions before we get started, Shame? Anything you want to know? Any problems? Okay. Okay. I'm sorry. I thought I'd lost the broadcast, but I just hadn't hit start. Okay. Cool. All right. So good morning, Nicole. How you doing? Thanks for coming today. It was nice talking to you and Imani in the meeting yesterday. It's always nice. Just remember, any of you who don't know it already, I'm always happy to schedule and have a quick meeting with you in Microsoft Teams if you ever have a question. Let's see. Okay. Good deal. Sorry, I have stuff on my lip. All right, let's go ahead and get started. It was good talking to you. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So today we're talking about Chapter 9, Physical and Cognitive Development in Middle and Late Childhood. Okay, so we're going to talk about, here you go. So here's where we are. Let's reorient ourselves. Remember, the way the study of human psychology, human developmental psychology is studied is broken down along two dimensions. It's period of age group, it's by age groups, and it's also by the three dimensions of human development, right? So if you remember, we've been talking about each human beings in each of these different age groups, and we do that because these age groups have similar challenges that are different from other age groups. These age groupings are arbitrary. We make them up. Okay, they're a social construction, but they're pretty useful for thinking about human development. So if you remember, we talked about prenatal development and the things you can do to make sure that that baby, to avoid teratogens, to make sure that baby is healthy and comes out with the best possible chance of survival. We then talked about that period from 0 to 2 years. So the time from when your baby is born to when they begin walking and talking. So we talked about infancy. Then we've just finished talking about early childhood. It's that time. Your book's going to say 3 to 5 years. You'll notice that there sort of appears to be an age gap because infancy goes from 18 to 24. I would say, in my mind, this early childhood goes from 2 to 5. So it's from the time they start walking till when they go to school, right? And and children are in that not quite controlled, not able to focus, not quite logical period in early childhood. Now we are talking about the time from 6 years to 10 or 11. So we're talking about the school age children from the time they start school until the time they hit puberty. So that's that's why we call it middle and late childhood. Now our next period is going to be adolescence, but we're talking now specifically about children from the time they start school until puberty. Now, if you'll remember, we suggested not only is the study of human development organized by periods of development, but it's also organized by dimension of human change. And I argued to you in chapter 1 that you can think of human beings as sort of changing in three broad dimensions. There's a physical development that includes nervous system development and the body and all the physical changes in the body. And then on top of that, human beings are changing mentally as intellectual abilities unfold. Remember the difference between an infant's ability to think and a 3-year-old's ability to think. So we're talking about how the mind unfolds. And then we talk about how the child's social behavior and personality unfolds, right? Now, for the first couple of chapters, we talked about, for infancy, we talked about one whole chapter on physical development, one whole chapter on cognitive development, and one whole chapter on social development. So we did 3 chapters for infancy. What you've noticed for early childhood and for middle and late childhood is we're going to take cognitive and physical and kind of push those together, because the changes that occurred in infancy in the physical and cognitive level were so profound that they're usually given their own chapter of discussion. Okay, Ronika, I am so sorry that your baby's not feeling well. I do apologize for that, and do the best you can do, and hopefully you can make comments whenever. Okay, so I want you to kind of organize yourself and sort of, because in the end, what's really important about developmental psychology, in my opinion, is understanding the whole scope of human development, seeing the whole picture. Okay? El Safir, right? It's Imani. Remember, Imani's been a bad girl and got kicked off of YouTube, I guess. What I want you to get over the entire semester is this idea, this larger perspective of human change, right? And so now we're talking about middle childhood, school age, prepubertal, and we're talking about physical and cognitive development. I know it sounds like I'm beating a dead horse, but really I want you to appreciate this organization of human change. Okay, so during this age, your kid's going to grow 2 to 3 inches a year. The kid's going to gain 5 to 7 pounds a year. So they're still growing and growing quite quickly, but they're not tripling in weight and doubling in size like they did the first year of life. You know what I mean? You can't sustain those first couple years of life of growth. I mean, you're talking doubling and tripling. It definitely starts to slow down. It slowed down in early childhood, and it's going to continue to slow down just a bit in middle childhood. The kid's going to grow 2 to 3 inches a year, 5 to 7 pounds a year. Bones will continue to ossify during middle and late childhood, but yield to pressure and pull more than mature bones. Why does this matter? Well, this matters. They still yield to pressure and pull more than mature bones. Read this as meaning your child's bones and joints are not ready for a full year of a selected activity. If you put your kid in year-round sports and you put them in the same sport for 12 months a year, their bones will yield to the pressure and pull more than mature bones. You can really hurt your children if you send them into a sport and have them play it all year round like I did with my 2 sons. And you know what? I picked the absolute worst sport. I had them playing baseball, because throwing overhand is really, throwing a baseball puts a lot of stress on some really small joints. And I had my kids play that sport 11 months a year. And it is just not good for kids' arms. So if any of you are thinking about putting your children in sports at 6 and 7, which is when all kids these days seem to go into their sports, that's fine. But please, please, please don't specialize in one sport at this age like I did. In fact, I will tell you, as a former college coach here at Wake Tech and talking to lots of other former college coaches, they want to see a well-rounded athlete that plays multiple sports. And all of these different sports are going to train your kid in sports-related physical movements that are going to be good for whatever sport you choose. So your bones continue to ossify, but they still can be damaged if you overuse them. Now, crazy thing about this age is even though us guys are going to grow up to be bigger and taller, at this age, girls are slightly bigger during puberty. So your girls are going to start hitting puberty a little bit earlier than our boys, and so they are going to, as a general rule, be bigger and heavier in 4th and 5th and 6th grade. Bone remodeling, exactly. So the puberty is going to cause your girls to be a little bit bigger. All right, now how does the brain change? Let's talk specifically before you started about the brain changes. Actually, motor skills. Let's talk about motor skills. Your motor skills become smoother and more coordinated. At this age, your girls are going to outperform boys in their use of fine motor skills. And so this improved fine motor skills is going to be the result of the final bits of myelination that occurs in your premotor areas, your motor cortexes, your cerebellum, and all of these pathways. So this fine myelination is going to lead to sort of a mature adult-like fine motor control around the age of 12. So when do all of the different parts of the body begin maturing? You can say that your fine motor and gross motor control probably is going to be mature by the time you're 12. Vision's going to be mature and adult awareness by the age of 1. And so each of these different parts of you is going to mature at different ages. Now, your personality is still not mature and your emotional control is still not mature. And we're going to talk about that now as we talk about the frontal cortex. The biggest changes that are occurring right now are occurring in the organization of your brain. Almost no growth is occurring in this brain. This brain is already full adult size. What it needs to do to become fully mature is to sculpt its architecture through blooming and pruning. Remember, we talked about that. The blooming and pruning and connections among different areas are what's maturing during this point. Now, the significant changes in structures and regions do occur, especially in the prefrontal cortex. Now, cortical thickness is something that is related to functionality of an area. And one of the things that you will see as we get older is this cortical area will sort of thin out a little bit. Cortical thickness, that is the thickness of the gray matter area on the outside of your brain. If you remember, you learned from introductory psychology that it's the outside part of your cortex. The gray matter is where memories are stored. The white matter on the inside is just bundles of axons connecting the different gray areas. So as gray areas begin to get thicker, that's a good thing. And so we're going to see cortical thickness increasing in the temporal lobes and the frontal lobes. Your memory and your personality and impulse control. Memory and impulse control. Okay? And so what we're going to see is we're going to see memory and focus and self-control are going to be maturing at this page. Now, it talks about focal activation. Activation of some brain area increases while others decrease. This is that final product of the blooming and pruning as your brain begins to find the best pathways. There are multiple pathways between this part of my brain and this part of my brain. Your brain may create 3 different connection pathways. It's going to choose one, and the other 2 aren't going to be as used. And so you can think of this focal activation as the final organization of your brain's best pathways for doing what it is you need to do most efficiently. All right. Now, the pathways and circuitry involving the prefrontal cortex, the highest level in the brain, are continuing to increase. Not done, not done, not done. Okay, and this is why when they talk about not executing murderers, juvenile murderers, the idea is that these prefrontal cortex, this impulse control, this ability to think about the implications of things. Yes, your 15-year-old kid knows right from wrong, but sometimes they just don't think about the long-term implications of things. Now, that's still not an excuse for committing a murder, but that is considered a mitigating factor that will keep a child out of the electric chair. We think it's because we know it's because this opinion exists because we know that the frontal cortex is still developing at this age. Okay, so there are the physical changes and growth, and there are going to be the changes that you're going to see in the frontal lobe. So that's sort of the biological, physical part of it. Now let's talk about health, illness, and death. Middle and late childhood is a time of excellent health. And you know what? It is the safest time in your life. You are least likely to die during this age of your life. After you've made it through that first year of life, you are in the safe years. You are in the safe years in middle and late childhood. Now, there are things kids do die during middle and late childhood. The number of deaths, the absolute number of deaths, is minuscule compared to what it is in other age groups, but it still does happen. And the reason that they happen are listed up here. Of course, it's going to be those car accidents, and this is why they continue to talk about bike helmets. This is why they talk about car seats and buckling up, because accidents, if your child is going to die, the chances are very, very low, but if they are going to die, it's probably going to be an accident. And so that's why there are all these PSA campaigns. It's simply because we know this is the biggest danger to children during this age. All right. And motor vehicle accidents are the most common cause of accidental death. Now, if you look, cancer is the number 2 killer. Still not very many deaths of cancer. But I had a friend who died. Actually, he was in adolescence when he died. He was 14, but he had leukemia back in I guess this would have been the early 80s. And leukemia is going to be, blood cancer is going to be the most common kind of cancer that you see. Now, there definitely, it's curable, as the statistics says. They've definitely gotten a lot better since my friend died in the mid 80s. In 1985 it was. But leukemia is still one of the dangers at this age. Birth defects can still kill people. And look at this, homicide. Now we're getting into that age where children are old enough to be around guns, and parents maybe are stressed out and are having their own psychological problems. So you're going to see that homicide does come into play. Let's see now, heart disease, cardiovascular death from disease. The typical, like what you think of as what we typically think of as cardiovascular disease leading to death in the heart attack. Not going to happen very often. But risk factors, but your child's behavior during this period is important for what happens later in life. Okay, so if your child is heavy and has high blood pressure during middle and late childhood, it's going to lead to an increased likelihood of coronary disease in later in life. So even though having a heavy child is not going to be dangerous necessarily to the child at that moment, It's predictive of later problems. And one of the things that I see as a youth umpire is I see a surprising number of children walking onto my field who are overweight and obese. And it's going to lead to problems later on in life. Okay. Like I said, 17% of children aged 6 to 11 are going to be considered obese, right? I mean, 17%, that's an awful lot. Now, why are children obese? Well, some of it is heredity, but a lot of it's going to be environmental context. Families that are in such a hurry spend a lot of time eating out and getting fast food. Remember, French fries are the #1 vegetable eaten by kids early in childhood. People are eating at irregular meal times. I remember as a kid, we always sat down at 6 o'clock every day in my house and had a home cooked meal with vegetables that was not fried very often, right? We had regular, wonderful meal times. But you know what? Families are in a hurry. Families are working crazy schedules, school, getting to activities. We're overscheduled. We're in front of the TVs too much. And all of this is leading to unhealthy eating and exercise habits. Now, children at this age can get high blood pressure. They can have elevated cholesterol levels. They can even develop childhood diabetes. And all of these things are very serious health risks. But even being a heavy child can lead to self-esteem problems if it causes the child grief, if they have friends who pick on the child about their weight. The lack of grocery stores and accessibility to affordable food options are big issues in many areas. Absolutely right. That's a good point. It is a lot less expensive to eat the foods that are bad for you, and especially in some areas, in those food deserts, when you go to big cities, fresh vegetables, fresh meat are very expensive to get. Thank you, Nicole. That's a very good point to bring up. That's a very good point to bring up. And so that's something that is consequential. Now, here's where I talk about all these things that are really pie in the sky. Are anybody really going to do this? It all starts with the parent getting into a healthier lifestyle and setting an example for the child, feeding the child healthier food and getting them to exercise more. How do you do that? How do you actually do that? Your book talks about this as if it's so super easy to do, but it's just really, really difficult. How do you, Nicole? You know what I mean? What would be a strategy? Um, uh, they're taking school. School is so interested in academic outcomes anymore that they're taking away gym and activity classes for our kids. Kids are not really allowed to go outside and play anymore on their own. It's all play groups, organized team sports. You know what I mean? It seems like kids do have activities, but the activities aren't free, unfettered, and multiple hours like they used to be when back in the 70s. And I hate to be one of those old guys that says back in my day, but back before computers there was nothing to do but run around outside and play. And so children got a lot more exercise. How do we push kids away from video games and get them out exercising anymore? Now, one of the themes that I am going to talk about, this aerobic exercise benefits, I'm going to talk about it now, and you're going to forget it, and then I'm going to talk about it in early adulthood, and then I'm going to talk about it in late adulthood. Aerobic exercise, getting outside, getting to the gym, running around a lot and sweating has tons of positive benefits. Of course, it's going to decrease your likelihood of being obese. Of course, it's going to decrease your cholesterol level, your waist circumference, and your insulin levels, as I mentioned up here, which are good things, good biological markers. It's going to decrease your incidence of obesity. But you know what? It's also going to have cognitive effects, and we're going to talk about it as a protective factor against dementia later in life. It's going to improve your attention and memory. It's going to improve your ability to sit down and inhibit your impulses so that you can focus on lectures. It's going to improve your effortful, goal-directed thinking and behavior. You're going to do better in school. How the food operate and don't have health or well-being of society is a big factor. Wow, Nicole's going to say that it's a conspiracy, and she might be right. She might be right. They do not educate and communicate the importance of diet and exercise. They're interested in their bottom line, which depends on how much of that product they sell, even if it has fillers and preservatives and stuff that's not good for you. People can never lose weight, whatever. You eat tons and put weights on. Right? Imani brings a good point, and that's why up at the top we say heredity. And heredity is something we can't control, and I would give you that. But given heredity, what kinds of things can we control? And Nicole brings up some good points. Food companies don't have our best interests in mind. The government is weak and impotent in controlling what these companies do and put in their food. And it all depends upon the choices that we make as adults and whether we can get access to the good foods. But I will tell you that exercise, if nothing else, exercise is going to help your child. It'll help with the physical indicators of health, but more importantly, it's going to help your child focus and do better at school. Now, briefly, I want to talk about Piaget. Piaget has a theory of cognitive development. If you remember, we talked about Piaget and development. We suggested from 0 to 2. Piaget said the kid was in a pre-symbolic period. I gained a lot of weight. Ronnie gained a lot of weight since he's come to the USA from the food industry, renaming and misleading products. Wow. Okay. I agree. I really like the chat we've got going on in the chat bar. Feel free, if you find that interesting, to keep talking about it. I'm going to carry on talking about cognitive development, but I'm watching the chat as it erupts. And so carry on, my good friends. Okay, so Piaget, if you remember, we talked about Piaget's theory of cognitive development. From 0 to 2, children are pre-symbolic, right? They can't do, they don't have objective self-awareness. They don't have object permanence. Now, we did agree that maybe Piaget was a little bit conservative in his estimate, but the idea is we're pre-symbolic. Then from 2 to 5 to 7, we are symbolic but not logical. And we talked about sort of the conservation tasks that kids can't do. We talked about the 3 mountain tasks where children demonstrate egocentrism. And we talked about children's not being able to do logical tasks. Now, one of the things when Piaget talked about these tasks, these conservation tasks and whatnot, he was talking about 3 sort of what he considered broad logical abilities that he thought demonstrated what he would call concrete operational thinking. All right. And so he would use what he called a classification task. And so if you look at this chart underneath me, this sort of classifies, this is my grandmother at the top in red, and she had 3 sons. Each son is married to a partner, and one of those sons, one of those marriages has produced 3 offspring. Okay, and so in a sense here, if I mention that to you, so my grandmother had 3 sons. Each of those sons got married, and one of those marriages resulted in 3 grandchildren. You can imagine and probably reproduce this chart of classification for me, where you classify the three marriages of the 3 sons. You see that, and then you see that one of those marriages led to 3 more children, and you are able to classify into groups and subgroups, right? If I asked you to go out in the parking lot and classify the vehicles into cars and trucks, and vehicles that were black and vehicles that weren't black, you would be able to go out there and say, Chris, there were 27 trucks, 32 cars, 26 of the trucks were black, one was not black, 15 of the cars were black, and you know what I mean? You would be able to classify. And so he thought of that as not just classification, males and females, but classification along 2 different dimensions. He thought of that as, in order to be considered concrete operational, the kids should have to be able to do a classification task. And the kids should be able to do a seriation task. Now, let's say I give you a set of straws going from the shortest straw to the longest straw, and I tell you to organize those straws from shortest to longest. What you will do is you will look at that whole pot of straws and you will pick the smallest straw and you will put it down first. And then you'll look at that whole pile and you'll pick the second next longest straw and put that next. And you will be able to seriate easily along one dimension, either going from small to big or big to small. Now, if you take a 5 or 6-year-old and have them do that, what they're going to do is they're going to do some trial and error as they move straws along, trying to figure out the overall seriation organization. However, what a concrete operational doesn't need to do is do the trial and error. They could look at them from smallest to largest, heaviest to lightest, and organize them quite easily. They could seriate them quite easily. And then, the conservation task, pouring the water into a smaller glass, knowing that when you pour the water back, it's still the same, right? So the ability to know that the material doesn't change is conservation, but then to understand the opposite of 5. 5 plus 2 is 7. 7 minus 2 is 5. You know this transitive, you understand the transitive nature of mathematical abilities. And so what Piaget argued was that concrete children starting around 7 to 11, these children are definitely going to be able to classify, seriate, and demonstrate transitivity, as well as conservation. And so in a sense, he argued that all of these abilities represent, being able to do all these abilities made you a concrete operational person. Now, I do have one small comment down here. You see I have the term horizontal decalage. Now, what is easy to see is that all of these abilities didn't come at the same time. So when you think about the movement from concrete operation, from pre-operational to concrete, it's not like the child wakes up one day and can suddenly do a classification, a seriation, a transitivity, and a conservation task. Instead, children will pick up these different abilities, and each children may pick up a different ability at a different time and in a different order. And he argued the fact that these abilities kind of trickle into the kid's arsenal. He called that the horizontal decalage. He argued, you know what, it doesn't all happen at once. It's sort of this decalage as the child just sort of develops these abilities. But by the time the child is 7, they are going to be able to pass all of what Piaget would call their operational task. This child is concrete and operational. Now, remember, the child's still not going to be great at abstract thinking. Now, quickly, before we finish up, I've got one last slide. Let's talk about the cognitive perspective, because after I present to you Piaget, after I presented to you Piaget in chapter 5, it was the sensory motor stage, I then talked about what newer cognitive psychologists have said. And then when I presented you in chapter 7 with the pre-operational Piaget lecture, we talked about what newer cognitive psychologists were saying. I'm going to do the same thing in this chapter as well. We just finished talking about Piaget and concrete operational abilities. What we're going to talk about is what modern cognitive research has found with children during this age. During middle and late childhood, children most dramatically improve their ability to sustain and control their attention. Children are definitely paying attention to task relevant stimuli. You can't fool their attention with the flashy car. They know exactly what to pay attention to when you give them a problem to solve. So their executive control, their ability to pick the right things to focus on and then to stay focused on them are dramatically improved, and I would say even maybe adult-like at this point. Their long-term memory is going to definitely be improving compared to the early childhood kids whose memory you couldn't really trust. You're going to begin to be able to trust these kids' memories in 7, 8, 9, 10. They're going to really begin to improve their ability to remember things in school and to learn stuff because they're now in this school mode. Now, why is their memory getting better? Now, in school, it could be due to improvement in metacognitive abilities and knowledge base. What exactly does that mean? By metacognitive abilities, metacognitive means understanding how your mind works. So, one of the things that you may or may not have learned is that if you want to remember something, you need to make an acronym or a funny image or relate it to something you already know. One of the things that I think school doesn't do that it should do is focus more on metacognitive training. If you learn how to use your memory, you can really develop a quite effective memory. In fact, in my Psych 150 class, those of you who are in my Psych 150 class, we talked about chunking and using visual imagery. And in my 7th week webinar, we did a memory task where I tried to teach you how to use visual imagery and the method of location. These are what we would call metacognitive abilities, knowing how your mind works. If I want to remember something, I have to do X, Y, and Z. Children, this is an executive skill. This is an executive attentional skill. Remember, just like knowing how to focus and knowing how to focus at the right thing, knowing how to stick something into your memory is an executive functioning skill, a frontal lobe skill. And your improvement at that is going to allow you to do better at remembering things. And you're going to already have a knowledge base. Now, why is that important? Well, if you go down here to where it says fuzzy trace theory, memory is best understood by considering verbatim memory trace and a gist. Okay, here's the deal. When you have a memory of something, most of the time we don't focus on the details. We focused on the gist of the memory, and that may cause us to remember one or two details, but then a lot of times it causes us to put in details that really weren't there. What do I mean? Well, I remember that I had a 4th grade birthday party. I remember that because I remember Stacy McCarver. I was in love with her when I was 5th grade. I was 9 years old. 4th grade, 9-year-old. I was so in love with Stacy, and she came to my birthday party. And I'll never remember that because she was a skinny little girl. She wore green shorts that day. I'll never remember that. But the rest of that, did you have cake? Yeah, sure, we had birthday cake. Did you get presents? Yeah, sure, we had birthday presents. Well, you know what? Really, I don't exactly remember that. I remember the gist of the party. I remember one important detail. Stacy was there. And then the rest of it I kind of add in because I know what birthday parties are like. And so, what they say is that by this age, some people say children have developed enough basic knowledge about things, what a birthday party is like, what the zoo is like, what going to the store is like, what all of these things are. They already have learned enough, they have a big enough knowledge base that they can begin to use this knowledge base as a memory cue to help them remember things. All right. And so this is what we would call the fuzzy trace theory. And it helps explain maybe why children's long term memory abilities tend to get so much better in middle and late childhood than they were as toddlers and 4 year olds. Okay. Now, also, here's the deal children have begun to develop and can use areas of expertise. Now, here's the deal. If you compare children's memory to college students' memory, what you're going to find is that your college students still have better memory. They still have better memory. So look over here in this chart right underneath me. You'll notice for random numbers, when you compare your 10-year-old children, their memory for random numbers with college students who have better memory abilities, what you're going to find is that these college students are going to remember more random numbers. Okay. Now, that's just because their memory, their executive skills are even a little bit better. Now, what you'll notice down here is that if you take children who have experience with chess, that is, they have an area of expertise. I started playing, my cousin taught me how to play chess when I was 6, and by the time I was 10, I'd probably played 500 games of chess. I had some chess experience, okay? Now, if you then put a chessboard out and put the pieces on the chessboard and ask a 10-year-old to remember where the chess pieces are, and then compare them with a college student that doesn't have chess experience, okay, and ask them to remember where the pieces are on the board, what you're going to find is that 10-year-old can use their area of expertise to perform much better than the college student. So what this chart shows you down here is that, yeah, your college student, your adults are still going to have better long-term memory unless they're up against a kid who knows something. And children at this age have enough experience to where they can know something. Maybe your kid loves dinosaurs and has an area of expertise with dinosaurs. Maybe your child loves BMX bikes or motorcycles, or reads a lot of Harry Potter books. Your child can develop an area of expertise that they can then leverage to impress an otherwise cynical adult, right? Okay, so that actually is the last thing I had to say. Holy cow, it looks like we are definitely talking about GMOs and chemicals and unhealthy foods. That almost suggests a topic for this week's webinar. I think I'm going to do a little bit of research, and tomorrow night, let's come prepared to talk about healthy eating. What do you think? It sounds to me like that's what you folks want to talk about. Interesting. Interesting. You know, it is right, Ronique. You can definitely go to the chicken stores. The chickens are just too big. Those chicken thighs and chicken breasts, they're just unnaturally big and healthy compared to what I saw on growing up on a farm, right? All right, folks. Well, look, that's all I have to say. We're actually 5 minutes early today. It'll make up for the incalculable minutes that I've already taken by running late this semester many times. Does anybody have any questions for me? Holy cow, you folks took the nutrition and ran with it. That's hilarious. And I don't even mind because you were talking about something that I had introduced. So if it works for you, great. All right, folks. I got coffee lip. I got coffee lip. I gotta go clean my coffee lip off. All right, folks. Y'all take care. Have a great day. I will see you tomorrow in Wednesday night webinar at 6 p.m. Otherwise, have a great day. Take care. Bye.